I would encourage worship leaders to view themselves more than a worship leader. To go, that's on the list, like that's somewhere. It's on the list, it's there. But number one, like I'm a child of God. Number two, I make disciples, because that's part of the Great Commission. And so then going, okay, who are the people when I die, they're still running? That I think that is the coolest privilege. Like if I lose my vocal cords, I've got so many little buddies that are raised up in worship, leading, and I got to sow into that. So I'd say find a joy in raising others up and forgetting about your own name.
This episode is so fire. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Worship Ministry Training Podcast. My name is Alex Nfiejin, your host. If you are new to the podcast, how it works is like this. I release one new episode a month, and we stick to one topic per month, and we go as in-depth and practical into that topic as possible. And the reason I've been doing it like that for the last 7 years is it allows you to know exactly what kind of content you're going to be getting. You don't have to guess when you click on an episode like, what's the conversation going to be? Are they going to ramble about 50 different topics? No, we're going to stick to one topic. We're going to go in depth, and we're going to hopefully give you something that you can take and apply to your ministries immediately starting today. So that's why we do it like that. Go ahead and dig through the topics lists, find the areas of interest to you, and be helped and encouraged. Also, if you're new, you might not know we have a website as well, worshipministrytraining.com, and we've got tons of free articles, free training resources, free courses, as well as paid courses in areas like set building, team building, worship leader foundations, and increasing congregational engagement and participation. So go to worshipministrytraining.com, check it out, and be helped and encouraged. Well, in this month's episode, I'm talking with Chloe and Alvin from Circuit Riders, a movement that reaches young people with the gospel and equips them and sends them out for ministry. And I know in many churches across the world, we need more and more young people involved. In fact, some of my favorite people are the young people on my team. And there's such a passion and a delight and so much talent there, but they need so much guidance as well. And so I hope that in this episode, as we talk about reaching and teaching young people to be worshipers and to be prayer warriors, that you would be helped and that you would start to look for those people within your own ministry. So let's raise up the next generation of worship leaders together, because the kingdom work on the earth is too great for just us. So let's listen to this episode and be encouraged, and then let's go out there and get them for Jesus. Hey, everybody. I am here with my new friends from the Circuit Riders, Chloe and Alvin. Hello, guys. Welcome.
What's up?
What's up? This is going to be so fun. They're also here in Southern California with me in a different city, but we're neighbors. So why don't one of you tell us a little bit more about the Circuit Riders? Because I'm guessing that many of our listeners haven't heard of the Circuit Riders. But what is this movement? What is it all about? Who are you? What do you do? One of you can just kind of give us the deets.
Take it away, Chloe. Take it away.
Okay, Circuit Riders is birthed out of YWAM, which is Youth with a Mission. It's one of the biggest missions organizations in the world. And YWAM's DNA is to know God and make him known. And they go all over, unreached people groups, you name it. They're hardcore, gritty missionaries. Circuit Riders is kind of the university expression of YWAM. And so we live here in Huntington Beach. There's maybe, I don't even know, 100, 250, 300 staff. And our whole goal is to reach young people, university students for Jesus. And so we spend a lot of time touring and preaching the gospel, doing events, anything we can to reach anybody. So that's a short thing of what Circuit Riders is.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I was surprised to hear 200 staff. That's quite a lot, or 300 staff. So these are missionaries pretty much supported by local churches, friends, communities. Yes. Yeah. Wow.
All in faith, all 100% by faith, which is so insane. It's definitely a challenge, but it's possible. It's really exciting.
Yeah. That's so cool. And how long have you been on staff, Chloe?
So I actually kind of have a funny story. My parents started Circuit Riders.
Wow.
And so I've kind of just been around since the inception. I was in high school, and the Circuit Riders were actually, I don't know if you heard of the Methodist movement back in the 1800s, where they're seeing camp revivals. These lay preachers would go from town to town, and they had barely any training, and they'd preach the gospel. So I was about 16, 17 when I heard this message for the first time. And I remember practice preaching the gospel for the first time, and I just never saw myself is someone who could do to evangelize or anything like that. And I was totally awakened. So I've been doing it since out of high school. So
yeah, that's amazing. Now, one of the things that I noticed, and obviously you said this is the university expression of YWAM, but just how many young people you guys have leading, and then also how many young people you're reaching. And so a lot of the conversation today, I really want to hone around, how do we involve young people in our ministries, and how do we equip and empower and release young people to be the church? Because a lot of people say the young people are the future of the church, but that's not true. They're actually the now of the church, right?
That's right.
And so, but before we get into talking a little bit about engaging young people in our ministries, because I know many worship leaders want more young people in their ministries, but before we talk about that, I'd love to just hear about the logistics of running the worship side of the circuit riders, because when I go to your YouTube channel, I see that, worship and prayer, you guys have daily worship and prayer, or like 4 or 5 days a week, there's some sort of worship set happening. And I love like systems and administration. I would love to learn a little bit how you guys manage the madness of 4 or 5 worship sets a week. You got different worship leaders, you have planning center, you have sets, you got to track down people who cancel, you got people who want to approach a song differently. You have rehearsals and sound checks. Like, practically, what does it look like how do you manage that?
That's awesome. Alvin, I'll say a few things and I'll pass it to you. But basically, Circuit Riders has 2 expressions of worship in our ministry. The first one being touring. So when we tour across the universities, we just chuck up anybody that can sing. We make little bands. I think our record is we made 13 bands at one time, all stretched across America. People leading worship, going crazy. And then the second expression we have is Greenhouse, which is what we call our prayer room, which is what you're referring to that you see on YouTube. And that is actually a new thing that started in this pandemic. We had a word about the word greenhouse and about cultivating prayer and burning on the inside, not just being like missionaries and ministry robots, but really being in love and ministering to Jesus and the prayer house. So anyway, Alvin, share the logistics, share all the goodies.
Yes. So I think practically, kind of with what Chloe was saying, during the week, we have things like Monday nights, we do Friday night worship sets, and then during the week, we have Greenhouse and stuff. So some of that stuff will be live streamed, and then some of it is just us just going after the Lord together. So kind of how we plan it out practically is we have like one point person who kind of does all the admin. So they'll try and set a schedule about a month in advance and just be like, hey, like these are the people that we have as the band. This is who we have leading for this month. So we'll get a text about like a week before or something like that, and just kind of be like, hey, you're planned to lead at this time and so forth. So this is what you're going to do. Please send the band the song. So we use a lot of group text. We did use Planning Center at one point in time.
We hated it.
But yeah, it kind of fizzled out. So yeah, a lot of how we communicate with each other is just through group messages. Like I'll probably get a few here soon of just like Monday night worship, and then just like all the band and the worship leaders and stuff like that. So we throw all of our songs in there. So yeah, that's kind of how we logistically plan all of those things.
That's amazing to me. I mean, hey, whatever works for you, but like, so you're planning multiple teams, multiple sets a week, and you're not using Planning Center, you're just texting. How does your team know the arrangements of the songs and what key and the chord charts? Like, how are you guys doing all that?
We have a band that's really well practiced. They have a passion to be musicians outside the prayer house. So they jam together all the time. We have the space. They're creating, new music all the time. And then we play at a lot of places. And so the Greenhouse was actually such a sigh of relief to have an environment where our musicians didn't have to be like super polished and put together and have the arrangements perfect. It's kind of more atmosphere of just flowing with the Spirit. And honestly, more than anybody else being impacted, I feel like our musicians have really come alive in this, because on our Monday nights or the Sunday kind of service situation, they're so focused on getting it right, going through the set. And so it's pretty cool that they can just enter into worship. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. And that's special. So it sounds like you have that main house band almost. That house band, are they also on staff with Circuit
Yes.
riders? Okay. So they're like fully supported musicianaries in a sense.
Totally.
Okay.
They're so gritty. These guys will do anything. They'll DoorDash in their free time. I mean, they just want to be musicianaries so bad. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's cool. And I definitely want to get back to later in the conversation what you said about prayer and worship and going after the Lord and just really ministering to the heart of the Lord. I want to talk about how you guys have cultivated that, especially since it's a more new and recent expression for you. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I guess one aspect of that is as you're coming to lead worship 3, 4, 5 times a week, or I guess since you're not leading people in worship and it's more like expressing your heart to the Lord, maybe it's not as hard to keep your spirit fresh. Because I feel like if I was having to lead worship 5 times a week, it could become mundane, you know? And personally at my church, I do lead worship 3 to 4 times a week. And sometimes I'm just showing up and I'm like, here we go again. And I know even for my team, it can feel like, here we go again, another set, you know? And so how do you guys keep your spirits fresh when you're coming at it 5 days a week doing the same thing, you know?
Yeah. I would say probably 2 things. One, the number of different worship leaders we have. Kind of what we were talking about with the band, what we'll do is if we have like a younger worship leader or a younger musician, we'll chuck them up there with maybe the more experienced ones. So we do have a good turnover of new people doing it. But I'd say there's such a massive difference leading a room of people and being in a prayer room where maybe there's people joining you. But when you just think all I have to do is move the heart of the Lord, you're really not concerned. Are people singing? Are they joining in? Are they getting touched? I don't give a rip if anybody's getting touched. I just really want to move him. So I'd say it's actually very refueling, even though it might seem mundane. And it's special because what a lot of us worship leaders do at home or in our closet, we get the privilege of doing that same feeling of intimacy and rawness with our close buddies. So it kind of draws you closer to as a team of just being raw before the Lord together.
That's so good to hear too, that there is a difference between leading a room full of people and just going after God together. Because sometimes like leading a room just feels like I'm serving them. It's kind of a task, but not in a bad way, but it's like
Sometimes
serving.
It can be for sure.
One question I have would be, how has your worship expression changed as you guys have started these minister to the heart of the Lord worship times? Like, how has that translated into your corporate leading times? Has it?
I think for me personally, it's taken a lot of pressure off of me as a worship leader to kind of make something happen. Because I think sometimes the way we gauge success and the way like society has taught us to gauge success as worship leaders, as artists, whatever, is with engagement. So if people are engaging, and, you know, you see people raising their hands, you see them crying out, like you see them doing those things, like it's almost tempting to feel like, oh, I'm doing something right, which you might be. But it's like, even if they're not, like, it's not up to you. Like the pressure is not on you because there's nothing I could sing. There's nothing I could do to necessarily force the presence of God to come down in a room. Like the Lord's going to do what he wants to do. So I think something for me personally that has really changed the way that I lead corporately that I've learned in a greenhouse is just go after the Lord. Just go after the Lord, like in any and every set, and let him do the rest. Like it's not on us to create something. It's not on me to set anybody free because I can't, even if I tried. You know what I'm saying? And I think we definitely do listen to the Holy Spirit. And, you know, there are going to be moments where the Lord might speak to you in the middle of a set and be like, hey, like, I want to release freedom in the room, like declare free. You know what I'm saying? Like there are going to be times and stuff for that. But I think the striving of, you know, trying to make something happen is just, for me personally, has just been something that I've just learned to just, okay, God, you got it. I'm just here to worship you. You got the rest, you know, and he's so faithful to do the rest.
Yeah, that's so encouraging. I was thinking about that this morning, about a different context, and just like, if I can't trust God to take care of it without me like getting involved, then he's not a very big God. He's not a very worthy God. Like who is this God that I worship if I can't even trust him to handle stuff? You know what I mean? It's kind of crazy. How would you add to that, Chloe, in terms of what Alvin said?
Okay, well, one of my heroes is Corey Asbury. And before he was Reckless Love Corey Asbury, he was International House of Prayer Corey Asbury for like, I don't know how long. I was like 14 years old, totally, like, that was the first time I ever met Jesus, was watching this guy just pour his heart out every night, 10 p.m. set, loving Jesus. And I think what's so cool about him and what I'm seeing even now in our music is the Lord will drop these insane lyrics in Greenhouse that you're like, how did that happen? That was such a cool moment. And then he's like, and this is for the masses. Like, take it out there. It was birthed in such purity and, glory, but definitely go rip it. And so seeing what we cultivate in the Greenhouse and bringing it to a service and watching the Lord minister to people is very cool. And then I would say same thing. It's just a lot of pressure has come off of just being able to risk and just know each other even more deeply. And so, yeah, I just echo everything Alvin says.
Yeah, that's really good. I'd be curious to hear how this Greenhouse movement or portion of your movement, like, how did it evolve over time? I'm sure when you first started something like, okay, we're going to go after the Lord together, we're going to pursue prayer and worship, maybe it was awkward at first, maybe it didn't go sometimes. And like, I'm sure the more you've done it, the more you've cultivated just the right spirit, the right heart, and even the right practice of it. And so what has helped cultivate that spirit of worship and prayer? Like, what are some of the things that you've seen this really made a difference within our community? Is it just getting in the habit of doing it over and over, or is there something else there? Because I think a lot of worship leaders listening are like, I don't want to just execute songs. I want us to get to the place as a team where we can really pray and worship and connect with God and commune with him. So what has helped both of those things? Kind of
one of the things that I've noticed, and big shout out to Lindy and Chase, some of our leaders, is the way that they have cultivated worship in their own lives, because they lead a lot of what we do. It is honestly not only inspired, but it's challenged all of us to live our lives outside of circuit riders, outside of missions, just in prayer and worship. And so I think having just key catalytic leaders, for people listening, whether, you're the leader or not, like starting at home and just really cultivating that, because it really does bleed into everything else. Like it's going to get on everybody else. And I don't think we would be where we are today if we didn't have leadership that took prayer and worship as seriously as they do. And so I would say that has probably been one of the biggest reasons that, we even have Greenhouse, because like Greenhouse was one of Lindy had like a crazy encounter and felt like, this is what we need to do. And it really started from her. Just, if Lindy, that woman just worships. Like she'll just be in her living room, just on her piano, just going after the Lord with her husband and with her two little kids. None of them are older than 3 years old. And like, even them, like they're going after the Lord like crazy too. But it really started I think for us, one of the key factors was just having leadership in our life that really went after it as hard as they could. And so it really pushed us to do the same as well. And Chloe, you can add to that.
Yeah, I was just, Alvin's talking about basically at the start of the pandemic, Lindy's and Chase have had this word in their spirit for a long time. But then there was, quarantine and nothing. And so they just started worshiping in their house together. And we live in communities, so their roommates would come down and worship. And it started that way. And then we got an iPhone. I remember our first ones were like these little iPhone videos that were crazy ghetto. And then it was one camera. And there was such an awkwardness for sure. Because you're like, I am just here in a camera. It's so awkward. But then, we all grew into it. I think the need on the earth kind of pushed us all to go, okay, God, like we don't want to be ministry robots accomplishing this huge task list. Like we really want to be genuine in our love for you. So definitely leadership was hot.
Ministry robots accomplishing this huge task list. That sounds like a lot of Christian ministry, which is not a good thing, right? We're supposed to be before we do. But so let me ask you, what has been some of the fruit of diving deep into prayer and worship? What has come out of all this? I know you said some songs and some lyrics, but anything else that you've seen God do, just unbelievable, blowing doors open, moving mountains, miracles? What are some of the amazing testimonies that have come from pursuing Jesus first and foremost?
I think just even within our community, just like the crazy amount of hunger, just what we even see on like these tours and stuff like that, what we see in 21 Projects. Like right now we have a team that was just in Nairobi, Kenya. Shout out to all my Kenyans. I'm Kenyan. And they're in Cairo right now. And one of the testimonies that happened in Kenya was this little kid came, and I believe he was either blind or deaf, or
yeah, he had a type of blindness.
Yeah, like a type of blindness. And like the kid literally gets healed, like completely gets healed, And so like that's just one of many, many testimonies that we get the privilege of getting to hear or witness at a lot of these things. And I think at the core of it, it does start with worship and prayer and just like that heart of wanting to pursue the heart of God. And it's just like, I think of the scripture that talks about in his presence is, the fullness of joy. It's the fullness of all those things. And it's kind of crazy to talk about, but like we were made to walk in the fullness of that. We were made to see that. Like it shouldn't be a weird thing or like a one-off thing to see somebody get healed. I believe that if we're made to experience the fullness of the presence of God, the fullness of healing is in that. The fullness of breakthrough is in those things. And so whenever us as a community, we come around and just go after the Lord together, I do believe that it just opens the door to just see crazy miracles, signs, and wonders. And so that's just a part of it. But Chloe, Alvin,
I was thinking you should share a little bit. Basically, when in the midst of the pandemic, there was for sure the racial tension arising and the injustice. And our community has been really in tune with that. And how do we respond as Christians and missionaries? And I think one of the things that has struck us is the need for representation in the mission field. There's a lot of white missionaries, and that's cool, but we need Black voices out there. And so I remember we were getting struck by these injustices, and we have leaders like Alvin who's just like blowing us away. But we went into the greenhouse and we sung and we interceded for this injustice across the board. And I just remember those sets were so powerful, people crying out for missionaries. And then there's a whole movement that really arose out of those prayer times. You'll be better at sharing it, Alvin.
No, yeah, it's great. It's really real. So kind of like what Chloe was sharing, basically how it kind of started was Chloe's dad, Brian, had like this like dream, like this crazy God encounter, which was basically talking about injustice and like how we're supposed to rise up like as the body and come behind minorities and minority voices because the enemy is wanting to suppress those, right? And so it was this crazy God encounter. And like she was saying, in our prayer room sets, we would just begin to pray and just like worship and declare things. And literally, we started a movement called Black Voices Movement, which is just the empowering of Black voices, the empowering of minorities in the mission field. Because I can say personally, growing up, that I did not even fully know what it was to be a missionary until I was around like 20 years old. So that was 6 years ago for me. Like nobody in the community that I was a part of, nobody who was Black was really a missionary by any means, by any term of the word. And so it was out of those moments, out of those prayer times, out of those worship sets where it wasn't just Black people burning for a heart to see injustice be eradicated. It was my white brothers and sisters, my Latino brothers and sisters, my Asian brothers and sisters. And it's like, I just saw this linking of arms and just being like, no, like this type of injustice is ungodly. Like we can't stand for it at all. And so from that birth of Black Voices. And so we did one gathering, like we literally had like 3 weeks to plan for this gathering. And people found out about it the day before it happened and still flew out. Wow. Like 67 people were there. And then we just recently, like earlier in the month, had another Black Voices gathering where we had like 300 people like show up. And it was crazy. And it was all just about going after the Lord and empowering Black voices and being like, hey, like, yes, you're Black. Yes, you're this. Yes, you're that. But there's a seat at the table for you here. Like we need you to fully walk out and accomplish the Great Commission. You know, it's not going to happen without everybody. And so it's been so crazy just what the Lord has really brought up just in moments of intercession and moments of worship that were beyond songs, that were things like, hey, these are heart postures we need to carry. Hey, like these are cultures that we need to live out like within our community. You know what I'm saying? And so it's just like, it's pretty crazy how whenever you just you go after the presence of God, like it can be also the most sweet, amazing thing. But you can also leave feeling like really convicted, like, dang, like I got some things I need to change, but it's all good though. It's because it's the Lord wanting to deal with things because he wants to do something, so yeah, man.
That's amazing. I mean, you wouldn't think, like, how many of us would think like God wants to send people of color to the mission field? Like that idea would never really, I wouldn't be thinking about those two connection points, right? But when you go get alone with God and spend time worshiping him and listening and interceding, then he has the permission and you have the clarity of heart to hear what he wants to say. And it's like these prayer times, what I'm realizing in listening to you guys is that these prayer times are really like where you get to hear the voice and heart of God, and that completely like may reorient you or redirect you or put you on a new path or birth a whole new ministry. Like, totally. So when I ask you what's the fruit of these prayer times, it's like, a whole new ministry. And it might end up being hundreds or thousands of colored missionaries all over the world representing Jesus. That's amazing. That's an incredible answer.
Yeah, pretty cool. It's been stunning. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Now, Alvin, you kind of dropped a hint. You're 26 years old. Chloe, about how old are you, if you don't mind saying?
I'm 27.
Okay, so you guys are young. So I'm 36. I'm like 10 years older than you, believe it or not. But you guys are young, and then you're leading a whole bunch of people who are young. And yet, one of the things we constantly hear in the church is that young people are leaving the church in droves. But here in your movement, at least from the outside, it doesn't seem to be the case. You have many, many young people who are both in leadership and then training up other young people to be in leadership and be involved in life-changing ministry. So what would you say, in your experience at Circuit Riders, what are young people looking for today? Like, what are you guys doing that is really turning the key for them and reaching them and, empowering them so well? What's the magic sauce?
Okay, I would say the only magic sauce there is going and getting them. That's what I would say is I think God sent us to the hardest and darkest, right? You hear the university, the campuses of America are the hardest and darkest. You can just imagine just all the evil stuff there. But when we get on the campus and we're out there preaching the gospel, looking like total idiots, we are met by people going, I've never heard this. I literally had somebody ask me, how can I be saved? And you just hear about those things. You're like, man, they're really hungry. So what I've found is that anywhere anybody in the church says that place is hard and dark, I'm like, I doubt it. I doubt it is. My husband and I, we do most of our Carry the Love ministry in Europe. So we go to the UK and we go to Czech Republic and all these Eastern Europe countries. We go to the most atheistic country in Europe. And that's where we find the most hunger and the most radical believers. It's like the darker these areas are, when these kids get saved, they radically commit to Jesus. So I would say it all is summed up in just going and getting them and being risky, brave, forgetting your reputation, truly looking like an idiot, especially as a young person, going to another young person. I've had people grab my face and say, you're so cute, and laugh at me and do all the things. Oh yeah, it's been rough, but it's always worth it because there's always fresh fruit that's ready for picking,
Wow, that's an amazing answer. So Alan, I don't know if you heard the question, but like she said, going and getting them, going and getting young people is the difference between an old dying church and what is happening with you guys. How would you answer that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I completely echo what Chloe is saying. And I think also right now, specifically in the age and time that we live in, a lot of young people feel like they're not allowed to be who they are, or they're not allowed to be themselves. And so they look for spaces in where they can do that and where they can be that. And sometimes what actually ends up happening is, in looking for really just love and acceptance, it's found in different places. It might be found in, alternate sexual identity. It might be found in a bunch of different things where it's like, oh no, like the actual way in which you were designed is actually counter to that. And so I think something that Circuit Riders does a really good job of, that I've personally been very impressed with, because I remember growing up in the church and stuff like that. It's like, hey, unless you were like really anointed for something, it's almost like sometimes you weren't necessarily even noticed. And so I think something that Circuit Riders does a really good job of is whenever we get young people, really trying to understand, like, okay, who are you? We do these things called original design, where we just sit, we basically pray, we just ask the Lord, like, Lord, how did you design Chloe? What did you design her to do? What is her purpose? Kind of thing. And it's like, oh, like, Chloe, you're a breaker of boxes. Like, you carry breakthrough in the way that you lead worship. Like, just speaking identity and truth over these students. And so we see a lot of them coming into a realization of who they are. And from that place, it's like, oh, this is where they get to serve. This is where they get to move. And so kind of echoing to what Chloe was saying, like, you go to some of these campuses and it's like nobody's ever told them who they were. Nobody's ever been able to say, like, hey, like, this is who you are. You're a man of compassion. Like, you are this, you're that. Nobody's ever really been able to say that. Now, and it reminds me of the scripture that he who's forgiven much loves much. And I think we really get to see the embodiment of that in young people, where they realize, like, oh my goodness, like, the way that I've been living, the way that I've been doing things, I'm completely forgiven. And like, you see young people, like, literally being like, I have to give my whole life to this. I have to do that. So again, to kind of bring it back to the question, I think something that Circuit Riders does a really good job of is really trying to understand who these young people are and how we can empower them for what they're good at, for what they're made to do. And I think that's a big part of how, we're able to just get a lot of young people.
Which means we need to make the time to spend with them, to get to know them in order to see who they are and speak truth into them. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. It's a whole investment. That's right.
And they might not necessarily be a part of your ministry as well in the end. Like, I know so many students that I've met that we've sat down and heard their dreams and go, do it, run for it. And they go off and they start something incredible, has nothing to do with Circuit Riders. And they are not going to join our ministry. So also being like open-handed, like, we don't need people or numbers. It's like, we just are here to empower everybody.
That is the best mindset. And I wish every minister of the gospel said those things, believed those things, and lived that truth. So thank you for saying that. Now I'm thinking about the local church worship pastor who wants to see more young people involved in his ministry or her ministry. And what would you tell them? Like, how would you inspire them to see the young people at their church, or to even like go out of their way to find the young people at their church or in their community? And then how should they view those young people and give them a seat at the table? Anything you guys feel like sharing there?
I would say this, Jesus is a ministry. I think my view could be summed up in discipleship. Like, he really made a loud point. He should be exempt from that job of all people, but he never was exempt. He poured his life into 12 people, and that was kind of his main goal. So I would encourage worship leaders to view themselves more than a worship leader. To go, that's on the list, like, that's somewhere, or a pastor. It's on the list. It's there. But number one, like, I'm a child of God. Number two, I make disciples, because that's part of the Great Commission. And so then going, okay, who are the people when I die, they're still running? That, I think that is the coolest privilege. Like, if I lose my vocal cords, I've got so many little buddies that are raised up in worship, leading, and I got to sow into that. So I'd say find a joy in raising others up and forgetting about your own name. And, like, no doubt there's at least one young person in your church that has a gift to pray publicly or sing or something that you can pull out of them.
Yeah.
Chloe, like, she hit the nail on the head, honestly. And I think something that I see Circuit Riders doing, like, that has blown my mind, especially with where I've come from ministry, is like, we have like 18-year-olds like making entire media campaigns. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're actively being engaged, or young people going on tour and having to just lead and being like, hey, we see you guys as leaders, so here you go lead. You know what I'm saying? Like, we've trained you, we've equipped you, go do it. And so I think my encouragement to any local pastors or people is not only what Chloe said, because she explained that very, very, very well, but then also just being able to see them and engage them, put them to work, for lack of a better term, just like really engage them in that way. Because I think what that actually shows the younger generation is, oh, you actually trust me enough to do this. Like you actually believe that I can get this done, that I can actually do something, because we do. We really do. Like that is the goal. Like Chloe was saying, like forgetting about our own name, forgetting about our own thing. It's like, yeah, like I could be the guy that makes the media campaign and does all this. I know I have the skills to do that, but I want to empower our young people, because I know that whenever I'm gone, that they're going to be the ones to carry the torch. So you know what, you guys do it. I'm going to stick with you every step of the way. So I think at the core, it's really just like, it's just family. It's really just becoming a family. And if I have kids, and I know my child is a great artist, like they paint really well, I'm not going to tell them to go write me a song. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh no, you're an artist. Like, son, like, let's make some art. I want to help grow and cultivate this gift. Like any good dad would do that. Being a shepherd of your body, being a shepherd of your church, of the young people there, it's kind of the same way. So
yeah, and putting them in and kind of not expecting that they're going to hit a home run the first time, right? It's like, okay, public, you have a gift for public prayer. I'm putting you in, and you're going to fumble and stumble and maybe say something theologically inaccurate, but I'm okay with that, because there's no other way to get better except for reps.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. One thing that we do in Circuit Riders as well is we live in houses with tons of young people. So I personally live in a 3-story old hostel with 22 other young people my husband and I lead. So we really go out of our way to make our lives so uncomfortable. It's costly. It really is, to pour into people. And it's exactly what you're saying. I've set so many people up and they bomb. It's so bad, but it's such a privilege, because 5 times later they're hitting home runs and it's beautiful. But yeah,
love it. Can't get to the gold without digging through the dirt.
It's true. That's how we were made,
Yeah, totally. I'd love to, as we begin wrapping up the conversation, just shift gears a little bit to talk about your most recent album. I was going to say your newest album, but it's already like a year and a half old because the pandemic kind of,
Right.
But the most recent album, Jesus People, I'd like to hear what it was like preparing for a live album and what you learned from that process that you'll carry on into future projects.
Yeah. So I think my situation was a little unique just because I've been one of the musicians in Circuit Riders. And I've kind of transitioned more so into like a worship leader. And so I think with this past record that we just did, it felt a bit more interesting to not have an instrument attached to me. So that was something I had to kind of just be like, okay, I'm cool with this. But practice, man, especially vocally. I think sometimes as a musician, I just think like, okay, I just have to practice my guitar, practice bass, whatever it may be, and that's it. But practicing vocally was a big one. But also just really getting into a place of prayer and intercession for the project. This project was one that, like, as a collective, we would just get together at random times and we'd just be like, guys, we just need to pray. There are things happening. Like we know that the enemy hates that we're creating this project, like there'd be attacks or whatever it may be. But just really praying and just going after the heart of God, because it's like, at the end of the day, if the Lord's not on this, these are just songs. Mm-hmm. Like it's no different than what's already out there. What's the point if the Lord isn't breathing on this? And so I think one of the biggest things that I took away beyond the practicals of practicing and doing your due diligence on that was just interceding, just really getting on your hands, getting on your knees, going after the Lord. And not that the project would be like a #1 Billboard top seller or anything like that, but no, beyond that people would they would get encountered. We carry a very missional sound. Like that's part of what we do is raising up people, raising up disciples, like Chloe was saying earlier. Like, Lord, would you grip people's hearts for the gospel, that, they wouldn't be able to go to school without sharing the gospel, that they wouldn't be able to be in church and just do church the normal way, like praying for those things that are kind of outside of just yourself. And so I think that was one of the biggest things that I took away from this project and that I'm going to carry into other ones is just striking the ground in absolute prayer and intercession for what the heart of God is over the project. And
before Chloe, you answer, let me ask you, Alvin, like practice in order not to sound good, but in order to feel so confident and comfortable that you're able to be in the moment and free and go where the Lord would lead you. Is that why?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We talk about like as being an instrumentalist, like prophesying through your instrument, that's something that we preach because like, in scripture, we see that the Levites would go before battle and they would prepare the atmosphere, and so who's to say that, the God of all the universe isn't going to speak to you with a melodic line that you're supposed to play. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think sometimes we can even just bind the Lord to just try and confine him to words. Like, oh, if I'm hearing from the Lord, it's strictly words. But like as an instrumentalist, it's like I've been in settings and moments where it's like, wait, this guitar part, I never would have thought about this like on my own. Like, Lord, what are you doing? And it's just so. I think even beyond that and beyond just like being able to engage, I think that there is something to be said about, being in a spot of such excellence with your instrument, with your craft, that if the Lord is to drop something on you, to drop like a line or a part, like you're not now fumbling, trying to figure out like, well, how do I play this? Like, it's like, no, like you can just go straight into it and fully receive whatever the Lord might be trying to say to you in that moment with that. So yeah, I think both and though, because definitely you do want to be able to engage and just
be awesome.
And just do it.
Just do it. So Chloe, what about you? What did you learn from this project that you'll carry on into future albums? And yeah.
I think for me, I don't know if there's any worship leaders out there that feel this way. I'm definitely not the most confident, like worship leader, songwriter all the time. I struggle with like the feelings of like, what do I have to say that the world would need to hear, or am I even good enough? Like, we already got so much stuff. Like, am I needed even? And just overcoming any areas of fear and going, okay, God, I'm going to do this. Like, use my voice, like make me a vessel, and writing with others and just really pressing in. So I'd say for me, just overcoming fear of man, fear of even how something's supposed to sound. I think in our generation, especially the next one, Gen Z, there's so much more creativity and melodies and things like that. Like, what's okay even? And just being free to not be like a different music group, to not be maybe the most popular sound, and to just be authentic and go, okay, I'm going to add it to the pot of other artists and songs and just let it minister to whoever ministers to. So for me, I'd say personally, overcoming fear and letting the Lord use me how he wants.
So good. Okay. Rapid fire, the top 2 songs you think worship leaders should listen to and introduce to their church, Chloe, from that album.
Loving You All Eternity and One Desire by Eileen.
Alvin?
I'm going to say Oh the Cross and I'll Go Anywhere.
Okay. I know the one, I really love you. That's with you, Chloe, right?
Yeah.
That's really beautiful. So anyway, I'll put links in the show notes for the listeners to check out the album. It's very, very good. Very well produced, very well performed. You know what I mean by that. But yeah, very excellent and yet very authentic. And I think you guys did a great job. I'd love to just give you guys the final word. Any final words for our listeners? And then you can tell us, obviously, where to keep up with Circuit Riders. But yeah, final encouragements for worship leaders all over the world, leading in different contexts, big churches, small churches, rural churches. What would you like to say?
My final encouragement, after the years of doing this, I think the biggest thing that I would probably say, it really is just about Jesus. Like it has to be like in our everyday and everything that we do. It's like, it can't just be about Jesus on Sundays and then on Monday morning, it's about myself. Like, it has to be about Jesus the whole way through, and not unto yourself being exalted and glorified. Like, it being about Jesus doesn't mean that you're going to write a song that millions of churches sing. It being about Jesus doesn't mean that you're going to have a career in music. It doesn't mean any of those things. It just means that regardless of where your life goes with the gifts and the talents that you've been given, God is always the number one in getting the glory and getting the full glory for what you're doing. And so I think I would encourage any worship leader, any musician, that in everything and in all that you do, really put God first, with no additional agendas of your own self-glorification, or with no expectation to really get anything other than his glory. And so I think that would be my last exhortation, if you will.
That's really good. That's really good. Chloe?
I would say this, that when we think about the heroes and the fathers and the Christian world, or even moms, Amy Carmichael, whoever, we think about Billy Graham, all these big guys. I'd say the same need that covered the earth then covers the earth now. And Jesus looks to and fro across the earth looking for those that are looking at him righteous, and he's ready to use us mightily. It has nothing to do with our reputations, our, resumes, anything. He's looking for those who just are righteous and looking at him. And so I would say, just be ready for God to use you in incredible ways. It's way bigger than you're thinking. There's a massive need out there, and he's going to send you. So that's what I'd say. Keep going. Jesus loves you. Amen.
I love it. I love your passion and your fire, Chloe. You're so infectious. It's amazing. So,
awesome. Thank you.
Oh man, thank you guys. Thank you so much for being here. Where can people keep up with you guys online? I'm sure they would want to follow you on social media and other ways.
We're on TikTok and we're on Instagram as, are we Circuit Rider Movement or CR Movement? I think we're CR Movement.
Yes. And Circuit Rider Music has its own Instagram and stuff as well.
Yes.
Okay, I'll put links in the show notes for all of that.
Fabulous.
So listeners, you don't even have to try to find them. I'll just put links in the show notes. Just open that little thing and click on the stuff.
We're on all social platforms, even LinkedIn.
Oh my gosh, awesome. Hey guys, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much for your time. And I've been inspired and encouraged, and I know the listeners have as well. So thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us, Alex.
Yeah, seriously, thank you. It's been so fun.
All right, well, that's all we have time for today. I hope this episode was a help and encouragement to you. If it was, please send it on to another worship leader in your life. That would help us and encourage us as well. And if you'd like to, please leave us a rating and review on iTunes. We always are encouraged to see how God is using this podcast in your life. And be sure to check out worshipministrytraining.com for tons of other free resources to help you be a great and God-honoring worship leader. And I will see you next month for another helpful episode. God bless.